Bullion index futures reflect sectoral performance. Cash settled at expiry. No tender or delivery margins. This is TV18 and you're watching CNBC TV18.
Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to MF Corner. I'm Sumaira Abdi. Today we are going to answer the many queries that have been coming to us from our viewers. And joining in this afternoon, we have Harshvardhan Rungta of Rungta Securities and Tarun Birani of TBNG Capital Advisors, who join in to answer all these questions. Gentlemen, good afternoon to both of you, and thanks very much for joining in. A lot of questions have come in from Twitter, so let me get to the first of them. Amit Kanani writes to us, and he wants to know that in the current scenario where interest rates are down, is it advisable to invest in dividend-based mutual funds in this scenario? So Harsh, let me come to you first on this, because I think, Amit has mixed up his concepts a little bit.
You're right, Sumaira. So, when you talk about interest rate movement, I mean, that has nothing to do, and there is no linkage between deciding whether to take a dividend payout option or to take a growth option. In fact, when we look at the interest rate movement, the impact that it has on mutual funds and the schemes and the portfolio that he's invested into probably, they would either result in a capital gains or a capital loss, which is going to be reflected in the NAV of the scheme. So in case now he's talking about a scenario where interest rates are actually going down. So in this particular situation, he will notice that a scheme will possibly have a capital gain, because of which the NAV would have gone up. Now, if an investor is in a growth scheme, he can still take the benefit of this capital gain. He can redeem manually if he or she wishes to do so. So you don't really have to take a dividend payout option and wait for the capital gains to be given out in the form of dividend by the fund houses. So, dividend payout or growth, in fact, is dependent on the regular cash flow needs of the investor, not linked to the interest rate movement. Another point I'd like to highlight here with respect to taxation, in case he takes a dividend option, so from 1st April 2020, this financial year, all the dividend that is being paid out in the hands of the investor will be taxable in their hands, and they will have to pay tax as per their own tax slab. Earlier, the situation was a little different, wherein the fund house would deduct the dividend distribution tax and pay out dividends, which in turn was tax-free in the hands of the investor. But from 1st April 2020, that's not the scene. So you should be very careful if you're going to take a dividend payout option, especially when you don't need the money.
All right, got it. And in fact, we have another Amit who's sent us the next query. He writes to us and he says that he wants to achieve 8 to 9% growth in this, because he says that there are high expense ratios that mutual funds have, and therefore he thinks that a minimum 8 to 9% is required. Tarun, do you agree?
Yeah. So, hi Sumaira. I think the question it has asked, it has two parts to it, and let me try to address this question, addressing both these parts. The first part, achieving 8 to 9% in the short term, is it achievable or not? And the second part is on the high expense structure. So talking about the first part, 8 to 9% in short term, according to me, whenever we do a profitability analysis, it is very critical. In short term, capital protection is the most important part. And if you ask me 8 to 9% return, we have seen a trend over the last 3 months. The interest rates have gone down by almost 1.5%, and the 10-year GSEC yields are closer to 6%, and the short-term yields are anywhere around 5%. So in this environment, to achieve a 8 to 9% with a capital protection kind of environment looks difficult to me. And yes, you can always invest into high-grade corporate fixed deposit where you can earn, say, 9%, but you will have to get into lower ratings. So are you ready for that? That is a question one need to ask. The second part of it is a high expense structure. Yes, if the investor himself can take care of the investments, they can invest into direct plans of the mutual funds, that is achievable. Or second part is one can look at exchange traded funds. Those are also low cost product available. But according to me, for that, the investor, what kind of work investors have done for investment, that is critical, or they need a help or not. So all those things will decide the investments. Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite a fair point you've made, Tarun, and I hope, Amit, you've been listening to that. The next query comes in from Manish Mukherjee. He has recently invested in the Edelweiss Banking and PSU Debt Fund. The time horizon that he has mentioned is 4 years. So he wants to know whether he should continue, or is there any other fund in this category, which is the banking and PSU debt fund, or any debt fund rather, that he should switch to? And also what he's seeking is the advisor's rating of the Edelweiss banking and PSU debt fund. Harsh?
This particular scheme that Manas has selected is good. I mean, the Edelweiss Banking and PSU Fund is a good fund, and he most certainly be invested in it. Now, with respect to whether you should stick to this banking and PSU fund or go for another debt fund, the SEBI guidelines for the banking and PSU fund very clearly specify that 80% of the portfolio needs to be into banks, needs to be into financial public sector enterprises or public financial institutions. So, there is no mention about the credit ratings of these papers. But however, you will notice that in the Edelweiss that he's invested into, the entire portfolio comprises of either the AAA rated or the sovereign. So from the safety standpoint, he's in a good scheme. There is no problem at all. Now, I could give him comparisons. He could also choose an Axis Banking and PSU fund or the IDFC Banking and PSU fund. The only difference between these two would be that the Axis and the IDFC Banking PSU funds have an average portfolio maturity of between 2.5 years, wherein the Edelweiss that he's investing into has almost 8.5 years as the average portfolio maturity. Now, he mentioned that he's looking to invest for a period of 4 years. Now, if I have to match his time horizon with that of the portfolio maturity, then Kotak Banking and PSU fund fits into that scheme because that has an average maturity of 4 years. However, in the Kotak scheme, I mean, they have an investment of approximately 20%, which is either in AA and below rated paper. So I guess, there is always going to be that situation where you're not going to get one scheme for, your entire safety requirements as well as the portfolio maturity. However, between the Axis, IDFC and Edelweiss, if he wishes to maintain an Edelweiss, is fine. Otherwise, he could shift to Axis or IDFC, only purely considering the average portfolio maturity.
You've raised a very valid point, and not a lot of investors do that, which is to align the time horizon that they have in mind to the maturity profile, at least in many of these debt schemes. Do you think, that should be the basis of the decision? I mean, if you found two funds which are, as good as each other, should this be the deciding factor? Is it more important than any other quality?
Not really, Sumera. I guess the primary factor in current times would be the credit rating of the investments that they are making, the scheme is making. However, if you can align it, it is desirable, of course, because, simply you have a maturity of 4 years in your mind. You need the money after 4 years. And in case your investment, the scheme that you selected has an average maturity of 8.5 years, then obviously it's going to be slightly more volatile than what you can fathom. So the idea is that if you can match it, great. If not, then the portfolio is anyways going to be churned over the period of time. I would, in this particular case, recommend, because it's also a debt fund, I would recommend go with a portfolio which has a lower maturity than your actual time horizon. So for that matter, I've recommended the Axis and the IDFC because they have a 2.5 years average maturity. You can be invested into that for a period of 4 years because the papers will get renewed. They will renew the portfolio at regular intervals. So it will be slightly better for you rather than going for an 8.5 years. That is the reason I actually highlighted the portfolio average maturity topic.
Okay, got it. Thanks very much, Harsh. The next query, and this is something very, very interesting because the recent gold rally has stunned investors, and a lot of people are still looking to either get in or capitalize from it or maximize the profit from their gold investment. So Mayank Nikunj has written to us, and he wants to know what are the near-term prospects of the world gold funds. He also wants to know the risk for an investment horizon of 3 years. Now, world gold funds, not a lot of people would have heard of it, but these are actually, funds which invest in the stocks of gold mining companies overseas. And in 2019, they have actually delivered better results than physical gold. But, physical gold this year, of course, has seen a phenomenal rally. So, Tarun, what would you advise that our viewer do?
Great. So While addressing this question, two, three important points one need to look at. First is scenario on the gold part. Gold, as we have seen last 1 year, have delivered double-digit returns and one of the best performing asset class. And if we deep dive, what has been the big reason for that? We have seen the real interest rates globally is negative as we speak today. And US 10-year short treasury securities are currently minus the inflation. If we do, that is at minus 0.7%. In this kind of environment, and we have seen historically any point of time, whenever this kind of negative real interest rates happen, the gold as an asset class always do very well. Apart from that, the uncertainties related to COVID as well as a second wave coming in. So there is a China-US tension. All those things again is making case for this asset class for at least a medium term very strong. So I also expect that some part of the portfolio in gold is advisable at this point of time. Second, let's look at way of investing into gold. So there are three ways. One is either you can invest into gold ETF, or secondly, you can invest into gold funds like these World Gold Fund of BlackRock, what we are talking about right now. This fund actually in turn invests into the equity shares of the gold mining companies. I have tried doing a rolling return study of 3 years because this fund has almost 12-year history. And in that, on a downside protection point of view, if you look at, compared to a gold ETF, it is much more riskier. So there is much more downside because it's an equity product we are talking about. So anything which happens to these companies where they have invested, it will actually naturally come into the performance of this scheme. So anybody who ready for high risk, high reward, I think can look at this World Gold Fund. But I would rather look at a normal gold ETF, or for that matter, a sovereign gold bond fund looks as the most preferred route to invest into gold as we speak today, because it gives you complete tax-free returns on maturity. It gives you 2.5% annual coupon. Apart from that, the depreciation of the gold prices. So I think among these three, one can look at based on the risk profile.
All right. With that, we'll take a very quick break. Harshvardhan and Tarun will stay on with us. When we come back, we're going to get back to answering some more queries. Stay tuned. Hi, welcome back. You're watching the MF Corner. Now, we've been answering queries that have been coming in with our two guests, Harshvardhan Rungta and Tarun Bhirani. So let's continue doing that. The next query comes to us from a Twitter handle who goes by the name of Laughing Crab. So Laughing Crab writes to us and he wants to discuss the AMC exposure risk. Now, what he's asking is that what could be the maximum allocation to a particular AMC in terms of how much should an investor invest in the funds of a particular fund house, especially if that investor has a large corpus of say 5 crore rupees for a horizon of 20 years. And the additional question that he has is what happens if the fund house itself shuts down? So two questions here. One is that, in a portfolio that an investor has in which they have many funds that they have invested in, what should be the maximum that you should allocate to a particular fund house? So which could be 2-3 schemes of the particular fund house or any one scheme. Harsh, is there any method to this?
Not really, Sumaira. In fact, we don't have any figures to say that, maximum exposure that you should take, should be to a X percentage. There's no scientific formula to that. Of course, it's your comfort level that you would have with a particular AMC. However, if you just look at the top 5 or 10 AMCs in this country, okay, we have about 40 plus AMCs, but you look at the top 5 or 10, the assets that they manage are in excess of 1 lakh crore. And all of these names are, large financial institutions who are not only in mutual fund business, but they have presence across different businesses in the country. So it's very unlikely that if you're choosing a top 5 or 10 fund houses to invest with, they'll close overnight. So they may not close. Okay, there could be a business decision wherein they may not want to pursue a mutual fund or an AMC business, and they may want to sell that business or merge with another AMC. Now, in all such cases, the investor does not stand to lose anything because the schemes will be merged into a new fund house in that matter, and then investor has got an exit option. As per SEBI guidelines, if there are any changes like this, the investor gets an option to opt out of that particular scheme and take his money out. So I don't think there is any specific reason to worry if you're choosing amongst the top 10 AMCs. Now, however, if your investment is of a large amount, I mean, you're investing say about 5 crores as a portfolio, then you may certainly look at diversification, but from taking the expertise of fund managers. So do not worry about the existence of a fund house, but try and take the expertise of different fund managers and different investment styles across different fund houses. So if I may just give a ballpark figure, I mean, a simple way would be that you can say I will not invest more than 20% of my investable corpus in a particular AMC. So in that manner, you automatically have 5 AMCs in your basket. So I think that should be a fair point to begin with.
All right, the next query comes in from Ashika Surana. So she has actually written to us by email. She's a 30-year-old lady who has invested in the Axis Blue Chip Fund and also the Nippon India Pharma Funds. Now, she says that, for now, she wants ideas on how she can generate wealth over the next 3 years. And, over the next 3 months, she will look to increase her allocation. Currently, she's investing just about 1,000 rupees per month in each of these funds. But, how could she actually move along to generating a little more alpha in her portfolio? Tarun, what would you recommend she do?
Yeah, so before getting into any investment recommendation, the most important thing one need to go through is suitability exercise. So what is most suitable for you? And when you talk about suitability, there are 3-4 important factors. Like she mentioned, she has a 3-year time horizon. She is 30 years, so age is on her side. But in terms of risk tolerance, we need to understand what risk tolerance capability. I understand she is looking at high risk. Keeping all these factors in mind, both the schemes which she has selected looks good to me. Axis Blue Chip, as we talk, is one of the best performing top quartile scheme in the category, which invests primarily into the large cap securities. And in terms of rolling returns also, if we look at compared to the category, it has always outperformed. So this scheme is definitely a great scheme. Second scheme which she has selected is a very sector specific scheme. She need to be aware that sector schemes are always high in risk compared to any other category, and this is highest in the risk profile. But considering the environment where we are in the COVID, post-COVID scenario, we are seeing a couple of very interesting developments. So if we look at last 3 years, pharma has been one of the worst performing sector. But if we look at year to date, pharma has delivered double-digit returns. Again, one of the best performing sector. Again, the demand continuity compared to other sector is very good in pharma. As we speak right now, there is a lot of shift which is happening globally. Let's say Chinese production moving to India, all these talks are also going on. So looking at all those things, pharma should continue to do well. And the fund she is talking about, it has a very good long-term history of almost 14-15% annual returns. So that again looks good. But one more interesting theme which I like at this environment, the current environment, and this is a very high risk strategy, is investing into the banking funds. So I have seen last 1 year banking funds have delivered almost minus 25% kind of returns due to all these challenges of COVID, what we are talking about right now. But given the situation getting better now, I see strong banks will recover much faster. And we have seen this in the earlier 2013-2008 environment also. There has been a ROE expansion with all the high quality banks in that environment. So I am very bullish from that point of view on banking. And if she has a 3 to 5 year horizon, she can look at investing some in the banking also.
All right, Ashika, that's the advice for you. The next query comes in from Ankush Jain. And this is very interesting. Now, Ankush has given 2 options in terms of asset allocation, and he wants, expert advice on which option is better. Now, the first option includes 28% to large cap funds, 14% to mid cap funds, 14% to small cap funds, 14% to US international funds, and 30% to debt funds. Now, in the second option, what he has done is he has changed the small cap and made it, that 14% goes to a multi-cap fund. Everything else remains the same. So Harsh, I would choose the multi-cap option. What would you choose?
Yes, I go along with you, Sumaira. In fact, my preference also would be of a multi-cap, with a simple reason. When you choose a dedicated small-cap fund, the fund manager is mandated to invest the maximum portion of that AUM into small caps, whether he or she likes it or not, whether there are enough opportunities or not. Now, when you have a multi-cap fund, the fund manager pick up only the companies that he or she wishes to pick up. There's no compulsion. So it gives some more liberty. Even if there are no good investment ideas, the fund manager may not be under the compulsion to pick any of the small caps for that matter. So yes, I go with you on this, and I would recommend the option 2 to add a multi-cap instead of the small cap. The overall allocation looks fine. 70-30 between equity and debt looks fine.
All right, Harsh, Tarun, thanks very much. Appreciate your time this afternoon. Thanks for advising our viewers. With that, we'll wrap up on MF Corner, but do stay tuned. The team of Closing Bell joins you next.